again.
All right, audio level still good?
Yes, sir.
It is.
Excellent. Welcome to the third installment of In Search of True North, where we comment on all the news that isn't fit to print. Joining us this week is my good friend Lou Rano. Lou, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
So, one of the things that I was interested in talking about right at the top of the hour is this all the hullabaloo about I think like a 2,500 troop drawdown. Well, I don't even know if it's a drawdown. They really haven't made that clear. They've said that they're repositioning those troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't know when we went from something like 8,000 troops to 4,500 troops. The sources that I've found for the last status of where our troops were at, it was like somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 troops. Now all of a sudden we have 4,500 troops, and we're removing 2,000 from Afghanistan. Well, we're repositioning 2,000 out of Afghanistan to a different part of Afghanistan. We don't really know. We have 3,000 troops in Iraq, and 500 are being repositioned. And I was looking up the history of that this morning, and I thought it just seems like theatrics to me. It's not a full withdrawal, which is what Trump had promised, when he campaigned. So if you look back at the campaign promises of Obama and Trump, both of them campaigned against the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and both of them actually increased troop levels. Obama much more so. Under Obama, we went from something like somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 troops to like 100,000 troops. But then, to his credit, Obama, by the end of his second term, drew the troops down to somewhere between 8,000 and 16,000. I think it was down to like 8,000. Trump ran on, these wars are ridiculous. We need to end them. He takes office, and then not only does he escalate the troop count, but he actually gave Pentagon the authority to yo-yo troop counts as they see fit without his express approval, which General Mattis said would enable the military to be more nimble and to move troop counts as is necessary based on the facts on the ground. I think the worst during the Trump administration, it was between 15,000 and 20,000. We're told now by the media that it was down to 4,500 in Afghanistan, 3,000 in Iraq. Now combined, it'll be 5,000. My take is this is not a withdrawal. This is bullshit, fake news, because we'll still have a presence of 5,000 troops altogether. As soon as Biden takes office, if they say, oh, there's escalating tensions, or oh, the Taliban attacked a women's facility in Kabul, or something like that, then he'll have justification to ramp the troops back up. And I think this is all particularly disgraceful because with the case of Afghanistan, we've been occupying that country for 20 years, and we found out in the Afghanistan papers last year that it's basically been a shit show from the beginning, and even our highest generals involved in it have said they don't know what the hell they're doing. They don't know what their mission is. It's a totally aimless boondoggle that we should just end. And I think it's really interesting too that the Democrat sympathetic media, which supposedly is sort of like the less hawkish voice in American politics, is condemning Trump for pulling out just 2,500 troops, not only saying that it's too soon to do so, but somehow claiming that pulling troops out risked the lives of our soldiers. Bringing soldiers home is more dangerous than leaving them in a foreign hostile territory.
And the reason they make that argument is because you've got a smaller force over there, and that force is then supposedly more vulnerable because you don't have this massive amount of troops there that are, supposedly more easily able to defend themselves. But I will say, I'm going to use the cliche term military-industrial complex. So many political contributions are made by defense contractors, and they basically they have the ear of Congress and Senate much more so than an individual voter does, because they're paying for their campaigns. They're keeping them in office.
Yeah, and they're doing that for both parties, which I don't think most people realize.
Absolutely correct. Both parties. And when in the 2016 election, I haven't seen any numbers for the 2020, but 2016 election, actually more contributions were made to Hillary Clinton's campaign by the defense contractors than were given to Trump's campaign. And that goes back to what you said, is they're basically the individual voter. I mean, we're so split evenly down the middle in this country that Hillary won majority of the individual votes just because of the way the electoral college is set up. Trump won the election, and now you look at some of the swing states, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and had there been a couple thousand vote switches in each one of those, Trump would have done the same thing. Still would have lost the popular vote, but would have won the electoral college. And
you mean in this election?
In this election, right? Yep.
Yeah.
And it's I just don't know what to make of that, but I think the average American does not really. They see the endless wars that are going on, and they basically say, well, that's the way it is.
When they see it at all, like, the Vietnam era of constant war coverage, they realized real quickly that that's one of the best ways to mobilize public support against the war, is to show them what's actually going on. So you barely see it now.
Yeah, my son-in-law is in the Air Force, and he'd been over there several times, and I'm happy to say that he's not he's going to finish his career stateside. Thank God. I don't want him over there. It's they're blowing our guys up.
Yeah, my brother served the Marine Corps, and he went to Hawaii, was stationed in Hawaii, got deployed to Korea. So he never got into that Middle Eastern mess of whatever you want to call it. And I'm very grateful for that, because it's not good.
No.
And funny thing that Cody said, they try to hide it now. And, we're involved in something like 8 wars, technically, right now. And people don't know that. Like, my wife had no idea we were involved in 8 wars. And I was like, we're involved in 8 wars.
We're not at war. We're just, dropping a few thousand bombs per year on 7 different continents.
A police action. That's what they term it as. But Cody, you mentioned Afghanistan, Iraq, but those are not the only countries that we have troops in that are prosecuting something over there. Syria, we've got a bunch of quote unquote military advisors in Syria, and they all carry guns, and they, supposedly they are supporting the rebels or whatever they are over there. But
to his credit, depending on your perspective, his credit or his to his failure, Trump actually said explicitly, they're just guarding the oil.
Right. Yeah. Well, so on the oil front, so we've become energy independent with fracking, blah, blah, blah. I mean, environmentally, it's probably not the best thing, but I'm kind of in favor of, let's get everybody out of the Middle East, get them home. If they can't, has the potential of creating an environmental disaster, because you could have the rebels or the whoever they are, Taliban, Al Qaeda, go in and blow up oil fields and cause the same kind of fires that Saddam did when he was overrun in Desert Storm. And they had to get all our hotshot guys to come out and extinguish the wells and put them out. But I think that other countries locally to this need to be more involved than they are. And, we're 10,000 miles away. It's not our business. So.
Lou, to what extent are they setting these oil wells on fire because we're there?
They're not doing that now, but they did when the Iraqi war ended in that 80 in the late 80s.
That was the early 90s, the end of Bush's HW, the end of his first term.
Yeah, and
I thought he was one term, Kitty.
Yeah, and it was
that's what I meant.
More or less an environmental disaster. They had a lot of oil wells that were burning, and they actually we have a small group of folks in this country who are experts at putting out oil wells. They come in, set a bunch of explosives around the well. It uses all the oxygen in the air, the oil stops burning, and then they can go in and actually cap it. And that's what they did, and they had to do this, I guess, hundreds of times. I remember seeing news footage and just, hundreds of smoke plumes kind of spread across the country.
That's kind of a neat strategy to put it out. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, that's that is how they do it, and
sometimes you can fight fire with fire.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and they've got oil well fittings that fit over the casing, fit over an extremely damaged casing or wellhead, and then valves on top, and they can turn the valve off and the oil stops flowing. But it is a mess. I mean, you think of the that well that exploded in the Gulf here a few years ago. This was, although the oil was, I guess, contained on land. I don't think contained is a very good word, but it was all on land. It was not spread around by sea currents. There were still, many more times oil released into the environment than what happened with the thing in the Gulf.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you think the gun laws are going to look like under, assuming this election is upheld and Biden and Harris take office?
That is kind of a toss-up, because the Democrats lost a fair amount of power in Congress. I don't know what the outcome of the Senate runoff is going to be. Looks like both Georgia races are still in question. I think that if Biden does try and implement, adding more restrictions, more weapons to the assault weapon category, I think there's a pretty significant number of Americans that will just not comply. And in order to do that, you've got to go house to house. And so I will say this about the people who are anti-gun: they're really not necessarily anti-gun. What they want is all the guns in control of government. And I think
they believe in like a total monopolization of violence.
And I don't think it's really hard to look at history and find out that's a really bad idea. How many places, the first step in gaining control of citizens is you take away their guns. Yeah, Canada, they've basically done buybacks, taken away their guns there. Nothing's happened yet. Maybe they're a little bit more polite, but if you go to Venezuela, things have not turned out real well there. They took all their guns away early last decade, and through the people's votes, they've voted for more and more government control of everything, down to the economy, and subsidies, and now their people are starving. They can't. Their currency is extremely devalued, and they can't.
I'm pretty critical of almost everything we're seeing about Venezuela, though, because our government is actively trying to overthrow them. The U.S. government has placed a $15 million bounty on Nicolas Maduro, and has backed, I think, multiple coup attempts. Juan Guaido was claimed to be the legitimate president of the country, even though, from what I've seen, it seems like the overwhelming majority of the people there support Maduro and not Guaido. It seems like mostly the more affluent minority of Venezuela supports Guaido, wanting more of like a neoliberal type government. But the majority of people who are more poor support Maduro. And I haven't done a ton of research about it, but while I'm skeptical of the sustainability of a lot of socialist ideas, I do think it's tricky to blame the economic conditions in Venezuela on socialist programs that the government has enacted, when at the same time, for years, we've levied really, really harsh sanctions against the government of Venezuela, which, we're told by the media only target the political elite. Like somehow you can, with sanctions, you can target just a few people. But of course, that's a total fallacy. We're contributing to many people struggling to get food and struggling to get basic medical care. So, yeah, while I do think it's fair to hold up government programs like that to scrutiny, I do think we have to be really, really skeptical of any of the coverage that we're seeing from any of the sort of NATO-aligned media outlets, because obviously they're going to toe the regime line and do nothing but criticize what's going on there. Where if you like the Gray Zone has done specials where they actually sent foreign correspondents to Venezuela to actually ask people on the street what they think of Maduro, to interview Maduro himself, to show how Maduro's government programs work, and it's a totally different view than what you get from most of the mainstream media.
So to further some comments there, the oil companies used to be, they're public companies, and then Chavez.
Citgo, right?
Well, yeah, that was one, but Chavez nationalized all the oil companies, and Chevron, I think Shell was there, but their assets then became government property. They were no longer allowed to do business there. And so they pulled their people out that were actually operating the oil fields. And then the government put their own people in there to operate the oil fields, and production just fell off. And Venezuela has some of the most rich deposits of oil, in this hemisphere.
I think it's in the world. I'm pretty sure that they have the largest oil reserves in the world. I'll check that real quick.
But they certainly don't have the largest oil output. And now part of that is because of sanctions, but also if there were no sanctions, they still would not have the oil output that they should have, just because of the inability of their government to operate the fields. I think they may be able to pay people to come down there and operate the fields for them, but that's probably not going to happen, because those assets were basically seized by the government at the beginning of I think it was towards the beginning of Chavez's government. So this is going back.
I just don't think that the data supports that argument. I mean, hang on, let me show my screen.
Okay.
Start sharing. Okay, so according to tradingeconomics.com, this is the graph of Venezuela's oil production over the last 25 years. I think Chavez took power in the early 2000s.
Yep, and you see
I'm
that.
thinking 03, Cody.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's what I was figuring. Yeah, but oil production after it recovered was only slightly less than what it was before that, and actually,
That's
2015 is when the U.S. government really started levying under Barack Obama. His administration announced that Venezuela was a threat to U.S. national security. One former, I'm not sure if he was a member of the Obama administration or if he was a member of one of the NATO think tanks like the Atlantic Council, but I saw an interview where one of the apologists for the Venezuela sanctions actually claimed, well, we know that they're supporting Al-Qaeda, which is ridiculous. But you can clearly see that aside from this moment when Chavez took over, there was very minimal impact on oil output until the sanctions took effect, at which point you just see a huge drop off.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean any of that as a defense of socialism or of nationalization of resources. I just mean, I don't think that there's any solid evidence that Chavez or Maduro's policies caused the oil production to majorly drop off. I think it's pretty clearly the sanctions.
Sanctions, yep.
How do I stop screen sharing? Stop sharing. Okay, cool.
Lou, what do you think of stuff? So we're talking about oil. Obviously, oil is huge. That's the big reason why we're in the Middle East. That's why we're all this involvement with Venezuela. What do you think of movement towards, like, I guess I'll use the term Green New Deal for lack of a better word, but basically technologies that move us away from fossil fuels, that move us away from oil, and stuff like that?
Yeah, generally it's a good thing. If you listen to some of the rhetoric of the more progressive part of the Democratic Party, and that would destroy the economy as we know it today. We don't have the ability to do you know, mass public transportation like they do in, I'm going to say, European countries. Most European metro areas have great subway systems, mass transit buses and stuff like that, and people are easily able to use that, and not a lot of people, or there's I'm not going to say not a lot of people, but there's a fair number of people that can get by with no personal transportation. Much greater percentage in Europe than in the U.S. And we are much more dependent on our own means of transportation rather than public transportation. I hope that's coming out correctly.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And is that like that's just the way the cities are set up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's few cities in the United States that have a subway system that have, the streets are set up for public transportation,
Yeah.
right?
But getting back to greener forms of energy, electricity is that's eventually the answer, but the technology today to store that personally as an individual, I can go to the gas station, fill up my car with gas, also take a large container, fill that up, and I am set for energy for for at least a few days to a few weeks if they have some kind of an incident. So when Irma came through, I had a generator, but I did not have a decent storage of gasoline, and I did have enough to get through the power outage that I had, which was a little over 2 days. But on the and then I had to shuttle back and forth to a gas station that in an area where they had electricity, so they could run the pumps. But in the case of if you have an all-electric society, then an individual house they have to have storage necessary to get through times when they can't generate it, and then you've got to have some way to generate the electricity, which basically comes down to solar, unless everybody wants to have giant wind turbines in their yard, and that becomes that's still not a really good way to do it, because that is it's unreliable. The wind doesn't always blow, except during a hurricane. But those turbines they're not designed to operate in that kind of wind, and so they're shut down. So,
guys, pardon me for 1 second. I have to piss like a racehorse.
The problem I see is that solar is stored in lithium batteries. I mean,
yeah.
And when you store stuff in lithium batteries, like you mentioned, they can't hold long for like several weeks of stored energy at a time.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. And B, the mining of lithium is worse for the environment than what we're already doing.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess if you want to make the argument that we're going to run out of oil, let's say that argument, then I guess a spike in lithium mining that's bad for the environment is like short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Or something like that. But it's still not a long-term solution. And people like, Elon Musk and people who are pushing for these technologies like Tesla and pushing for alternate technologies, I think they're going up the wrong alley. I really do. I think they're trying to push these things that are stored in lithium ion batteries, and it's not going to work.
There's and I don't know what the answer is. Solar cells are very inefficient, and and then they're a non-starter on cloudy days. Wind turbines they're more efficient, but they're a non-starter when there's no wind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the answer is. I think it's good to move towards that, and clearly electric vehicles are going to become more commonplace as more and more network of charging stations gets established across the country. But instead of coming in and filling up your car in 5 minutes, you're going to come in and fill up your car in half an hour or 45 minutes. And so there's going to have to be much more expanded area for people to come in and plug their car in, and instead of a 10-lane filling station, you're going to have a parking lot that maybe is 100 parking spaces, all with their individual plug-ins, where interstate transportation, like I just went out to Colorado to go see my kids, and that would have been a lot more of an issue if I had an electric vehicle today, and versus the gas vehicle that I did drive. So,
Yeah, I've seen videos of people, taking road trips in Teslas and how, documenting how inconvenient it can be, and to varying successes. I mean, people are able to make it work. Tesla's made things where it's like, here's your next charging station.
yep.
Here's how long it'll need to charge. So they're ahead of the curve in that aspect.
Yeah.
But people don't think about, like, what are you doing when you're plugging your car in? You're using a coal-powered power plant that's still the power plant that's supplying you the electricity is still fossil fueled.
Even
And so,
if it is natural gas, it's still fossil fuel,
yeah,
quote unquote clean. And carbon recapture that adds so much cost to the production of electricity from fossil fuels that if they mandated that, then all of a sudden solar and wind would look really inexpensive. And our economy right now is it's kind of based on the world's economy is based on fairly inexpensive energy, and
on demand, no less.
On demand. Yep. And we get that from fossil fuels, and Green New Deal and things like that sound great, and they probably are, as long as we move towards that in very controlled increments. But to say that we're going to end all fossil fuels by 2050 is that means everybody's car has to go away. All the fossil fuel generating stations in the country have to go away. Nuclear becomes an option, but you've got to solve the storage problem for
the waste.
Yep, individuals. And
it's zero carbon, but there's nuclear waste you got to deal with. I mean, there's trade-offs to nuclear. I was reading up on that the other day, and it seems like the most viable in terms of keeping up with our current energy consumption, like you just mentioned, it's extremely high. So you need an alternative energy that can keep up with that. Nuclear seems like a good option. It's expensive to build, but like you just said, it's the waste and stuff like that. So
Yep. No good answers right now.
no, for sure. Cody, anything on energy?
I'm not super. I'm not as well researched on that topic. I did take a alternative energy course in college that Dr. Ernest Behringer put on at Eastern Michigan University. It seemed like it was kind of a labor of love for him as an offshoot of the physics department. And the thing that I came away with at that point, now granted this was 8 or 9 years ago, but what I came away with was that at least at that time, the alternative forms of energy such as geothermal, solar, wind were not sufficiently advanced enough, nor were our capabilities to store electricity effectively and efficiently long term to supply our current energy needs. And there are major issues environmentally and from a public health perspective with alternative fossil fuels like fracking for natural gas. So the conclusion that I came away with from that class, which may be an outdated conclusion now, was that basically basically our major problem that we have is consumption more than generation. That regardless of how we pivot from one energy generation source to another, it will be very difficult as time goes on unless we radically improve the technology to sustain our current consumption patterns, which is as much energy as we want, as soon as we want it, as long as we're willing to pay for it. It's working right now because pretty much, it's industrialized countries in the world who enjoy that luxury. As the rest of the developing world continues to develop and eventually wants to be able to consume energy the same way that the developed world does, I think that's really when the jig is up, unless we can find a way to more sustainably produce electricity on the scale that we use it and store it reliably.
The two big problems.
One thing I wanted to bring up while we're all together is Biden's cabinet picks so far. I don't remember all the specifics offhand, but I've been following it on my main man, Jimmy Dore.
Shout out.
Yeah, but one after the other, it's basically what anyone who's not brainwashed by the phony bipartisan duopoly would have predicted, which is that it's going to be a bunch of corporate insiders and lobbyists. So far, that seems to be the case. And I think I saw there was a senator that he brought into his cabinet who's basically voted the way that his corporate financiers have asked him to vote repeatedly. It's a lot of the same. It's basically it's looking like it's going to be the same sort of corporatist administration that we had under Obama, which I guess Trump wasn't that different, but the particular people who are being selected are the more sort of long-term politically and corporate experienced people that you saw under the Obama administration, I guess. So point being, we're not going to get what during the campaign was hailed as the most progressive president in history, or the most progressive president since FDR, I think people said a few times. We're not going to get any of that. Like what he said to his donors was, nothing will fundamentally change, and that seems basically to be the case.
And so I think that is probably pretty much spot on. I think the entire country is slowly, and this is just, this has to do with human nature, but we're kind of slowly getting more and more socialist, communist. People can, freely vote themselves into socialism and communism, but once you get there, you can't get out. There's no going back without some kind of a revolution. And
do you think that's what's happening in our country? Because I don't even think that we're becoming more socialist. I think that what we're seeing happen is a sort of gentle socialism for the corporate class, where basically they're allowed to mostly keep their profits private, but their losses get socialized. And what's happening for the lower classes is more of a rising authoritarianism, more akin to fascism, with a little bit of sort of socialist sugar to help the medicine go down. Like I don't know. To me, the alarmism over some rising trend of socialism in our country seems to me to be mostly misdirecting. Not even, and I don't mean that as an endorsement of socialism. I just don't see that happening. And what I see happening is much more corporate socialism and kind of more just straight fascism for the lower classes.
but in the area of, I'm going to say, healthcare, because everybody wants some kind of mandated healthcare in this country, and that's pure. That's pretty much pure socialism there. If healthcare is guaranteed for everybody, there's going to come down to two things, and this has to do with the tragedy of the commons. But if you get free healthcare, you're going to use the crap out of it. If it's made convenient and everything is at no cost to you, and then what ends up happening is that the services have to be limited in some way or another, and then only the rich get to, they'll have to go pay for additional services that the government has decided not to provide healthcare wise. And everybody's seen stories about, in more socialized countries like England and Canada, where people have come to this country, the well-to-do folks have come to this country to, get a surgery done or something of that nature, and because they haven't been able to get it in their own country.
I guess would you agree, though, that we do not have a free market system in the U.S., that we really have more of sort of a soft fascism in the U.S.?
For healthcare?
Yeah, where basically we have the government more or less legislating on behalf of the large healthcare companies.
I think that's very true.
Because I guess, and I make no argument about whether socialized healthcare would be sustainable long term. It's something that I still have yet to study in depth. However, most of what you're describing, where premium healthcare services are available only to the ultra wealthy and politically connected. Right. I don't think that that's that different than what we're seeing here, when one of the leading causes for bankruptcy is debt due to healthcare.
Mm-hmm. And that's some of that is probably true, but on the same side of things, or a different side of things, I don't know. You can go to a hospital with cancer or something like that, and they're going to treat you, or if you go in with some injury, you're going to be treated, and even if you're indigent and you have no insurance, no ability to pay, I think our healthcare system has a really difficult time of collecting from an individual, and then the loss to that healthcare entity is spread as an increase in the cost of providing it to everybody. So it's kind of built into the system, I guess.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's what's driving the cost of healthcare in the U.S. I think that's a complex problem. I don't mean to say that I know the definitive thing that's contributing to it, but I think much more so than what you're calling out. I think just the nature of the sort of fuzzy slush fund that occurs between healthcare providers and insurance companies, where there's not a lot of incentive to have the sort of price transparency and cost transparency that you would usually have in a market system. Yep. What strikes me about our current system is it demonstrates a lot of the waste and the mismanagement of resources and the sort of fuzzy uncertainty about the true cost of anything that you would typically associate with a fully socialized system. But we have all of the waste and mismanagement of a socialist system, but it's all privatized. That's one of the things that I started thinking about. Zach and I have talked quite a bit about socialized healthcare. He's kind of got me thinking about it more and being more open-minded about it. And the thing that this had never occurred to me, but basically what insurance companies, the service that they provide is you pay into it, and then if you need to take out of it, you can, as long as it's a legitimate need. But that service, when you think about it, everybody collectively paying into a pool, and whoever needs it, it relies on more people paying in than have to take out in any given year. And that service, to me, is basically a government service. But it's a privatized government service. And what's concerning to me, I guess, is they're not doing a very good job. They're contributing heavily to the soaring rise of healthcare costs, because it's one of those things where it kind of goes back and forth. Well, we'll pay you $500 for that, but then, okay, yeah, you can charge us $1,000 for this other thing. And on top of all that, while I usually am very reluctant to demonize the profit motivation, because I do think that incentivizes innovation and efficiency, it is weird to me that basically what they're providing is a very, very straightforward government service, but they're making a profit doing it, and they're not even doing a good job doing it. So I guess what's become increasingly interesting to me is wondering whether you can keep basically the entirety of the healthcare industry private, but just socialize the insurance industry, since the insurance industry is basically providing a pretty straightforward government service and doing a pretty shitty job doing it.
But that's basically what Medicare is. Medicare and Medicaid is that is That has been, it's no longer private, it's, government finance funded, and there's still, it's very progressive tax structure for those. Basically, the more you make, the more you pay. If you don't uh, pay into the system at all, you still get the benefits. That's another sticky, tough subject. Should government be involved in healthcare at all? And this goes back to I think personal responsibility. There's a lot of areas where the people have they don't want to take any responsibility over that particular aspect of their life. And it's kind of the tragedy of the commons goes in there, and it's if if stuff is provided to an individual for free, they're going to use more of it, or if it's subsidized in some way, they're going to use more of it than what they have to pay for, what it actually costs them. And then you're going to have a situation where the elite vote with their feet and they leave, go to another jurisdiction where they don't have that cost, and that's so.
I think a few things on this. First of all, the argument can be made that my taxes right now, however much that even is, should be going to paying for my healthcare, not bombing the Middle East. So I think a lot of people who want socialized healthcare look at this and say, people always make the argument, oh, who's going to pay for it? Well, I'm going to pay for it with my taxes. And there could be so many better uses of the taxes that I pay to the federal and state governments than what they currently use it for. So that's kind of an argument, I guess, that for it would be kind of a fundamental change in how the government runs things, right? And then the other thing, Lou, that you mentioned was that if people have it for free, technically, they're more apt to abuse it, to go for literally everything. And I think that kind of comes down to a human, as Cody and I talk about, a human spirit issue. It's like the purpose is that you don't have to plan as much for the future. In the United States, everyone's constantly fearing for their future, constantly, it's very, very consumerist. We're very convenience driven. Everything is so convenient. Everything is consumer driven. And if you don't have to plan for your future, the idea behind, a healthcare that you don't have to worry about getting some procedure done that you have to pay out of pocket for, the idea is that you don't have to worry about that aspect of your future. And I've heard in other countries, like Italy, for example, people who speak on their socialized healthcare say, I love that I don't have to plan for that part of my future. And in the United States, I think that's something that just goes over people's heads, is that, instead of thinking about that's something I don't have to worry about, it's now something people worry more about the abuse of the system than the successes of the system, if that makes sense. And I think that comes down to human nature, to people in America versus, maybe people in other parts of the world who are able to use a socialized healthcare system in a better way.
I think it's interesting too that so much of the debate in our country is about whether or not socialized healthcare would work, instead of looking at all of the cronyistic regulations that actually make our current healthcare system so dysfunctional, so that the largest companies make huge profits and jack up the prices of all their goods and services. It's interesting to me that I think so. I don't have a problem with people advocating for socialized healthcare or socialized insurance or Medicare for all or whatever, because at least they're advocating for a solution. I think one of my biggest problems is that the other side, which typically is the Republicans, they don't actually. The counter to all of that should be, here's how we improve our current system. Here's how we cut out the waste. Here's how we reduce the corruption and create market conditions that will actually provide price transparency. That's and right. will drive the decrease in price of goods and services, which is supposedly what the market's supposed to be great at, but we're not seeing that in healthcare. And I think that's because we don't have a free market system. And instead of saying, hey, here's how we can make the market more effective in healthcare, basically the Republican response to any progressive who proposes socialism is, well, that would be just awful. And then they point out all the ways that would be terrible, or they just make generalizations about how would we ever pay for that. And it's like, I don't know, cut the military budget in half. We'll still outspend every other country on the planet in military spending, but we'll have 300 to 400 billion to spend on healthcare. But yeah, I think that's one, and that kind of brings me back to what I've been reading in Chomsky's book, where you're not. The purpose of the media, the purpose of like the Republican sympathetic media and the Democrat sympathetic media, as well as the purpose of the Democrats and the Republicans themselves, is to allow a narrow window of debate, where I think that this is a pretty good example of it. Instead of actually debating how to fix our broken medical system in the U.S., where insulin, which is this common medicine that so many people need, and that's
an example right there.
Yeah, and it costs hundreds of dollars. It's insane. Okay, like I've been a huge market proponent for almost all of my adult life, but why isn't it working in the U.S.? And it's because we don't have a market-based system. We have a soft fascistic system. And instead of debating what the best solution to fix that is, we're just debating over whether or not socialism works, which I think is mostly distracting, and I think really just allows the people who are profiting off of our broken healthcare system to continue profiting off of it in near secrecy.
Yeah. And I'm going back to the specific example of insulin and just prescription prices is the prescription companies, they they do a lot of research and development. They spend a lot of money on it, and that gets rolled into the cost of the individual drugs, and then they're of course promoted on TV. You can find a drug for I don't know what syndrome, but you name it, it's on. It's being advertised on TV, and their costs are being recovered primarily, I think, in this country, and not in other countries where the drugs are sold. And
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Trump did try to do something that were. He tried to limit the amount of, if a drug company is going to sell a drug in another country, that the cost to Medicare and Medicaid patients has to be comparable. It can't be more expensive to Medicare than what the company is charging patients overseas.
Yeah, this goes to Cody's soft fascism argument is that, I'm looking up the manufacturer of insulin and
Eli Lilly is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't want to make assumptions here, but I'm going to go ahead and say that the manufacturers of insulin are huge government lobbyists. And that, you see that in almost every industry.
Yep.
Is especially healthcare and obviously military stuff as well, is that these are the lobbyists. And there's so many corporate lobbyists that pay these government officials to, either block or enact whatever kind of laws and bills that benefit them. And there's hardly any independent lobbyists who are able to pay these people as much money to, it's basically outbidding these congressmen to get these policies enacted. And that's what it comes down to.
Yep. And that's another thing. When you after you've served your terms in Congress, you get your retirement, you leave, what do?
You go work for these companies.
Become a lobbyist. That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to fix that.
No,
that is absolutely broken.
Yeah, I rant to Cody about this constantly, and it's the corruption aspect of it runs deep. I mean, you start to think about all the things like, why aren't there incentives for privatized? Sorry, I got my dog in here. He wants to join the podcast. Why aren't these companies incentivized to lower their costs? And besides the lobbying aspect of it, is that these insurance companies pay the fees. You know what I mean? Like, so if I go in for a surgery, my insurance company will pay for it. What's the incentive to lower the cost of that surgery? There is none. Yeah. The insurance company is going to pay whatever price you set, right? This is similar to, I'll try to liken it to like the college debt issue, is that the government's willing to give you a loan to pay for your $50,000 or $80,000 school bill. So the school has no incentive to lower their cost at all, because the government's going to give you the money to pay for it, and people are going to do it.
And you're not allowed to declare bankruptcy on that debt. Thanks in part to Joe Biden, actually.
Nope. But it's going to be forgiven under supposedly under the new administration. But
that's not going to happen.
I don't think it will either, because there's trillions of dollars we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So student loan. So this is something that you get subsidized. Now that's supposedly something that increases your value to society, hopefully, because you've used your degree to become gainfully employed. But
I'd like to interject real quick. My original alma mater offered a class on Harry Potter.
Okay.
Just a class, Cody, or a degree?
It was just a class.
Okay.
But that supposedly a student loan is supposed to be responsibly used. It increases your value to society. So society invested in you, and supposedly you're supposed to maybe pay that back. But and there's so many so many degrees out there, classes that really they can't be used in our society to provide for yourself. I mean, Harry Potter is a good one. That's pure entertainment, or for the majority of the people who've taken class, maybe somebody decides to, they want to go pay for somebody who's an expert in Harry Potter. Not.
Well, and like for myself, I got a degree in journalism, which is stupid. It's so stupid, especially if you're not going to like a major journalism school, like Northwestern or something like that. Yeah. Which, I mean, at that point, you're not even paying for education. You're just paying for the elite credential to put on your resume, so people know, oh, this person's part of the club. But to go to school and pay for a degree to teach you how to ask questions and write stories is asinine. Tens of thousands of dollars on that. I was lucky and had a full ride scholarship, which I readily admit I wasted on that degree. But the extent to which I've struggled since I graduated my undergrad, since I graduated with my bachelor's, the extent to which I've struggled, I don't blame that on the system. I don't say like, yeah, I went to college and, I couldn't find a job afterward. I blame that on the decision that I made to major in journalism instead of physics or mathematics, which were my original plans.
Yeah, Cody, I think there's a place for certain degrees like journalism, but a lot of times, especially nowadays with the state of journalism, it's just the school you can put on your resume and say, I went to Northwestern or I went to this school or that school. And you see increasingly the more reliable basically you go to those schools, you get a job at the New York Times, and then you're not being a journalist anyway. You're being some sort of propagandist that just spews shit to people. And you see increasingly these independent journalists are becoming hopefully more popular, like the Gray Zone. I like the Gray Zone and Jimmy Dore.
The mainstream media hates them, though, which is really interesting. Even Glenn Greenwald, they will shit on him all day.
And he's a whistleblower, so of course they hate him. But
look what happened to Glenn Greenwald. He's pushed out of his own The Intercept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he left of his own. He chose to leave, but yeah, it was basically they were censoring what he could say in the platform that he helped found. Yeah.
Yep. But I'm going to have to drop off because I've got a thing at 10 o'clock that I'm going to be late for because I'm not ready. So.
That's okay. I think we're good to wrap up. Lou, well, does anyone have any closing thought that they want to give?
I wish people were more responsible for all aspects of their life and less reliant on, quote unquote, free services. If you, and I don't know how to put this, but if you paid more attention, just save for a rainy day, don't fucking depend on some other pool of money that's government Social Security, government Medicaid. They're forcing you to to pay into a pool, and then that's being mismanaged. We all know that. But if my retirement is much, much better because I lived below my means for, I don't know, basically all my adult life, and I could get by without Social Security, but I've maxed out my Social Security every year since I don't know when, and now I want that money back, damn it, and I'm not going to get it.
I thought it was funny. I got in an argument with somebody on Facebook one time about how Social Security is a Ponzi scheme that's going to run out of money. And he said, look, it has enough money to last it till, I forget what year he said at the time, but it was like a decade or two away. And I pointed out, no, it has no money in its reserves. It has all the billions of dollars in reserves that are touted as contributing to its solvency. Yeah, those are IOUs. Those are treasury notes. The any excess money, I think it was Lyndon B. Johnson who made it so that all the trust funds, any excesses from those funds could be used to cover deficits in other departments. So after that, basically, any money that was left over could just be pillaged by Congress to cover other funds. So there is no money to fund Social Security.
And with that thought, it is a government Ponzi scheme, but I'm going to drop off, gentlemen. So I think we should do this again though, because this has been a fun time. So
Yeah. Thanks for
I do.
thanks for coming on, Lou. This has been great. All right, everyone. Thanks
Yeah,
for
Lou.
tuning in to the
Nice
third
to meet you,
episode
Lou.
of.
bye
Sorry.
bye. Yep, nice to meet you, Zach.
And everyone else, thanks for tuning in to the third episode of In Search of True North, and we'll see you on the next episode. All right.